Hello, I'm back. I'm Dr. Kelsey.
And I'm Dr. Emily Corville.
And this week's podcast episode is going to be about allergies.
Thrilling.
Yeah, it really is exhilarating.
Well, I think it's so interesting because we see it all the time.
Every single day.
Every day. I mean, I think I can speak for my dog has allergies.
Mine too, yep.
So it's something that is very near and dear to my heart.
Yes.
It's something that I think about every day.
Yeah, unfortunately. My perfect little free rescue has cost me a fortune in allergy workup, so I get it.
I would say allergies, surprisingly, one of the most expensive problems a dog or cat could have.
Yeah, for sure. So when we say we sympathize with you as owners, we really do. We really, really do, because it can be incredibly frustrating and expensive and time-consuming, and there's a lot of pattern recognition that goes into it. Slight detective work, as usual. It can get a little bit tricky. So
For sure.
I went to a bridal shower this weekend.
Oh, yeah?
Yep, in Arkansas. So I was, doing the bridal shower stuff, and I had someone come up to me. I was meeting the family for the first time. I had never met this side of the family before, and she was like, "Oh, well, what do you do for a living?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm a veterinarian." And she was like, "Oh." Her face changed immediately, and she was like, "Can I ask you something, please? Is that okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course." She was like, "I'm at the point where I think I would pay $1 million to the person who can get my dog to stop licking their paws at night." And I was like, "I can help you with that."
Sign the check.
Sign the check. Yes, yeah, I got you. I can do it from Lafayette, honestly. Like, I can do this. Like, we can do this. So it's a widespread problem for sure.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't think anyone's exempt from allergies. I will say, and we'll kind of get into this a bit more, Louisiana is definitely a hot spot for it, though.
Yes.
Because we got all kind of weird stuff, like fungus and allergens, pollens, all kind of weird.
And we don't have seasons. So where normally across the country, like let's talk about North Carolina, I so envy the vets up there because they've got spring, summer, fall, winter.
Yeah.
It just kind of all becomes one down here.
No, it's a good point. Yeah,
that's going to play a little bit later into our conversation, but that's kind of where the waters get muddy and it can be really difficult for us to figure out exactly what's going on.
Exactly.
Because we don't have seasons. And then there's food and there's so many things that go into it. So let's just get into it.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess my first question would be, whenever you think of an allergic dog, because I know for me, I think sneezing, itchy, watery eyes, things like that. That's how a human would present, maybe for allergies.
Congested.
But for a dog, it's different.
Yeah, that would be a typical presentation for a dog. Not out of the realm of possibility. We can kind of touch about that later, but the vast majority, pretty much all of them, are going to come for itching, recurrent ear infections, licking their paws, especially at night when you're trying to sleep, having like recurrent infections in their abdominal area, underneath their armpit, even anal gland, recurrent and really bad anal gland problems can be tied into food allergies. Rectal itching can be tied into food allergies and allergies in general. And then, over the tail base as well, we'll talk about that a little bit more too. So yes, your itchy, licky, red, inflamed dog is most likely going to have an allergy of some kind.
Correct. And whenever, itchy is like skin, we forget like extensions of the skin, like the ears, you mentioned that.
Yep.
Like their little booties, we don't think about those things.
Around the eyes, underneath the chin, all of these things.
That's all an extension. So anytime any of those things are itchy or infected, if it's a one-off situation, that's great. You're so lucky. But if this is something that's recurrent, then you probably have an allergy situation.
Yep, and I'll always go into those appointments and kind of plant that seed and say, like, look, we will treat this as an isolated incident, but it is likely going to recur. And I always set up for being patient with me and me being patient with owners and clients and patients, because it can be extremely tricky to, very rarely can we walk in and say, oh, it's your dog is doing this, this, and this, or your cat's doing this, this, and this. It's this allergy. We're done. Probably the exception to that would be fleas. Flea allergies can be, though they can look like anything, they can be your generic itchy paws, recurrent ear infections, abdominal rashes, and things like that. A lot of dogs will have problems, especially like over the tail base, kind of where like the back ends and the tail begins. We'll see a lot of hair loss, crusting, scaling, and honestly, if we're going to find a flea, that's usually where we're going to find them.
Yeah.
But in your experience, does a dog have to have, or a cat, especially not cats, do they have to have fleas on them to diagnose them with flea allergies?
Oh, you're asking the good questions. No, they don't.
No, no, they don't.
I mean, it's really the saliva, and I think we talked about this in a
Yep,
previous podcast.
we did,
You know what I mean? That's so itchy to them.
Yep.
So, I mean, one bite
Yep.
will mess them up,
Yep.
especially a dog with a flea allergy.
Yep.
And I think it's important to mention, like, we keep talking about how frustrating allergies are. And the reason they're so frustrating is because there's not just like one kind of allergy, right? There's 3 big types,
Yep.
flea allergy being one of them,
Yep.
flea allergy being the easiest one to treat. So,
And the most common.
yeah, so I would say, yeah, it doesn't matter what situation you're in
Yep.
and where you live. If you have a dog that is itchy,
And they're not on flea prevention.
yeah, put your dog on flea prevention.
And that's going to be the first thing we do, right? So, like, if I have someone come in complaining of allergies, even if I don't find a flea, and even if the tail base is not necessarily incorporated, the first thing we're going to do is put them on flea prevention. Because if you can get them on good flea prevention, treat all the other stuff that comes with allergies, and we'll talk about that in a second, and then it happens again as soon as they're off of meds, but they're still on good flea prevention, it's probably not a flea allergy at that point, and we can move on. But until you cross that off, you know, that's the first thing that we would do. That's the first thing a dermatologist would do. And so I think that that's a really important point to make, is like, you know, making sure they're on good flea control. But as you know, it starts with the allergy, right? And it's unfortunately a cycle. So you've got the underlying cause, which is fleas, and then we'll talk more about food allergies and environmental allergies. So you've got the underlying cause. It causes them to itch. So they itch, they chew, they bite, they scratch, they lick, and they break that protective barrier in the skin. And then a lot of times when you notice it at home, it's because the secondary infections have come in. So staph and yeast and things like that. And then they come in second, and then those itch too. So like if you're not treating the secondary infections along with the underlying cause, you'll never really get to the bottom of it. And then you gotta then figure out, okay, what do we do so we prevent this from happening again? So it's just this big cycle that can get
And I always,
tedious.
I talk to owners a lot about breaking the itch cycle.
Yep.
How do we do that? Because it's like, you came in because your dog's itchy, and then I do my exam and I see that you've also got a skin infection.
Yep.
I see like some pustules or some redness, some crusting, things like that.
Yep.
I might take a slide and stick it to that area of skin
Yep,
and
little sticky
look at
slide.
that under a microscope to see, do we have yeast, do we have
Yep.
bacteria, what's going on. And if I do that and I see some infection there, I'm going to
Yep.
say, okay, your dog does have an allergy, yes, but it is being, it's worsened by
Yep.
this infection that's
Yep,
there.
100%.
We definitely want to clear up any secondary infections. So it's one of those things where by clearing up an infection, we're not solving the problem, but we're helping.
Yes.
So to get down to the root cause of the problem, because yes, there's going to be these secondary issues that pop up, we have to figure out what kind of allergy your dog has.
Exactly.
And so we just talked a little bit about flea allergies and how we kind of rule that out. Have your dog on flea prevention. If your dog's on flea prevention and still
Cross
itchy,
it off the list.
we know it's not fleas.
Moving on to the next. Now, caveat, make sure it's a good flea prevention. Simparica, Brevecto, those types. Amoxi sometimes can be overwhelmed for a dog who's allergic, because there is a difference, right, between a flea problem and a flea allergy.
Correct,
Because, I rescued a little dog a couple weeks ago, covered in fleas, but not missing any fur. The skin was not inflamed. That dog is not allergic. That dog just had fleas, versus you'll have some dogs, they're missing all the fur over their butt, right? Like those dogs are truly, truly allergic. So making sure it's a really, really good flea prevention is also part of the equation as well.
I agree.
Just wanted to throw that in
No,
there.
that's wise. Yeah, and it's a good point to make, because not every dog that has fleas has a flea allergy.
Right. There's a difference, for sure.
So, and you'll know if your dog has a flea allergy, because there's going to be a lot of hair loss and a lot of irritation and things like that.
Flea biting, all that stuff. So if you haven't noticed, this conversation takes a long time. So when we talk about allergies, these appointments are longer. They can last a long time. So same thing with this episode. It's kind of a longer episode. So watch what you can at one point in time, but always come back and follow for part 2. There may even be a part 3 with this one. It was so long. But definitely come back to get more information, because I think it's important to hear all of it from start to finish. You can put us on 2 speed if you need to, but definitely it's good information to come back and listen